maybe that connection when, she's drawing too, or just whatever it may be?
I mean, Rika's throwing so much attention, so I think we can definitely take an advantage out of that. And then
in the hushed sanctuary of Carver Hawkeye Arena on that electric February night in 2024, as 15,000 fans held their breath and cameras from across the globe were fixed on a single moment that would etch itself into basketball history, Caitlin Clark stood at the free throw line with the weight of expectation pressing down on her shoulders, needing just 8 points to surpass Pete Maravich's legendary NCAA scoring record. And yet what unfolded after she coolly sank that record-breaking shot was not the eruption of celebration that so many anticipated, but instead a moment that was startlingly private, deeply human, and profoundly revealing. For as the crowd roared and the scoreboard flashed history in the making, Caitlin found herself enveloped in the embrace of her coach, Lisa Bluder, and in that embrace Lisa whispered words so tender and so rooted in years of sacrifice, unwavering belief, and mutual resilience that both women dissolved into tears, not of triumph over records, but of gratitude for the bond that had quietly been forged long before the cameras ever turned towards them. A bond that transcended the game itself and revealed a story 24 years in the making. One that had begun the very first day Lisa watched a scrawny teenager from West Des Moines walk into her gym with fire blazing in her eyes and doubt gnawing at her heart. And what the world would later come to understand is that this singular moment was not only about Clark's greatness, but also about the quiet, steadfast woman who had shaped her into a champion. When Caitlin arrived at Iowa in 2020, she was a 5-star recruit, brimming with confidence, armed with limitless potential, and carrying a reputation as a scorer capable of changing the trajectory of any program. Yet such gifts always arrive wrapped in paradox. For the same audacity that could elevate a team could just as easily fracture its chemistry, and Lisa, with over 2 decades of coaching behind her, recognized the fine line she would have to walk. She had seen talent before, but never had she encountered someone quite like Caitlin, someone whose instincts defied traditional coaching, someone whose range stretched 30 feet and beyond, who would pull up from the logo without hesitation, whose vision allowed her to thread passes through impossible windows, whose very presence seemed to alter the physics of the game. At first, there was friction, for as is often the case in relationships destined to become transformative, 2 strong personalities collided in a swirl of brilliance, stubbornness, and a desire to be understood, and Lisa found herself at once exhilarated and terrified, watching this teenager attempt shots that should have been considered turnovers, only to see the ball splash cleanly through the net, causing teammates to shake their heads in disbelief while she, the seasoned coach, felt a knot of worry in her stomach, wondering how one could possibly teach or contain instincts that transcended strategy. That worry led to a pivotal moment after one particularly audacious practice session, when Lisa called Caitlin into her office, a space heavy with the echoes of 2 decades of Iowa basketball history, its walls adorned with photographs of players who had come and gone, championship banners whispering of past glory, recruiting letters testifying to years of persistence. And it was there, in the slant of late afternoon light, that the young player, still raw yet already carrying the aura of something extraordinary, sat down with folded arms and a spark of defiance in her voice, declaring before Lisa could even speak, "I know what you're thinking. You think I'm reckless, selfish, too willing to take shots that might cost the team." Words that revealed not arrogance but vulnerability, the internal doubt of someone aware that her greatness was not yet fully understood. Lisa studied her carefully, recognizing not only the bravado but also the flicker of uncertainty behind her eyes, and in that moment, the veteran coach made a decision that would redefine both of their lives. Rather than trying to mold Caitlin into the kind of player who fit neatly within the system, she leaned forward and said with a smile that carried both courage and conviction, "Actually, I'm thinking about how to build an entire offense around letting you be exactly who you are." Words that hung in the air like a revelation, transforming the conversation from one of restraint into one of liberation. For in 24 years of coaching, Lisa had never encountered a player with such a fusion of vision, range, and instinct, and she realized her job was not to change Caitlin, but to create an environment where her gifts could not only flourish but also elevate everyone around her. What Caitlin did not know was that in the nights leading up to that conversation, Lisa had pored over hours of film, not of Iowa's opponents, but of Caitlin's high school performances, replaying every audacious shot, every daring pass, every subtle act of leadership, and through that painstaking study she had come to a profound conclusion, that sometimes the greatest act of leadership is not in imposing control but in knowing when to step back, to trust, to allow another's light to shine, even if it overshadows your own, because that light has the power to lift an entire team, an entire program, and in Caitlin's case, eventually an entire sport. From that day forward, their relationship became one not merely of coach and player but of mentor and protege, of guardian and dreamer, built on a foundation of trust, respect, and shared vision. A bond tested through defeats and disappointments, through games where Caitlin's brilliance was not enough to secure victory and Lisa had to remind her that greatness is measured not only in records broken but in resilience displayed, and through triumphs where together they carried Iowa further than many had thought possible. By the time February 2024 arrived, what the world saw was Caitlin Clark, the record-breaking superstar. But what they could not see was the years of late-night conversations, of tough love and gentle reassurance, of Lisa reminding Caitlin that leadership was not about carrying the team alone, but about making those around her believe in their own capacity to rise, of Caitlin slowly learning that her gifts were not diminished by sharing them but magnified, that the very shots once dismissed as reckless were now the heartbeat of a system built to showcase her courage. And so when she stood at that free throw line, poised to eclipse Pete Maravich, she was not alone, even though every eye was fixed on her. She was carrying with her the invisible presence of Lisa's belief, the memory of that first office conversation, the countless hours of trust exchanged between them, and when she made the shot and history shifted in that instant, the celebration was not a roar but a whisper, for in the quiet embrace that followed, Lisa told her something only the two of them will ever fully understand, words that released the flood of years of sacrifice, words that affirmed Caitlin's greatness not as an individual scorer but as someone whose journey had been made possible by the bond they shared. And in that private moment, the tears that fell were not for basketball but for the deeper truth that sometimes greatness is not born of solitary brilliance but of relationships that nurture, protect, and challenge us in ways the world will never quite see. That is why, for Caitlin, that February night was more than the breaking of a record. It was the realization of a promise made long ago by a coach who had vowed to believe in her players.
A game overall, just I think a little more arena react as opposed to the more layered set plays.
Yeah.
Just how has that process been for you at this point of the season?
Lisa gave Caitlin the freedom to play her game, to embrace the breathtaking audacity of 30-foot three-pointers, impossible passes, and the kind of instinctive brilliance that most coaches would have tried to discipline or restrain. And in return, Caitlin embraced the responsibility that came with that trust, carrying it not as a burden but as a calling that shaped her growth from a gifted teenager into a leader who would redefine what women's basketball meant to millions, yet what the public never saw. Hidden beneath the roar of arenas and the glare of television lights were the private moments that formed the true foundation of their relationship. The late-night phone calls when Caitlin, stripped of her public bravado, admitted that doubt gnawed at her. The quiet conversations after bitter losses when the weight of expectations seemed to crush her spirit. The gentle way Lisa could always find the right words to help her player process the suffocating pressure of being not just Iowa's star, but the face of women's college basketball itself. Coach, Caitlin had confessed one evening after a particularly brutal loss in her sophomore year. What if I'm not good enough? What if all of this attention is just hype? And Lisa, looking at this young woman who was already rewriting record books and changing how the world spoke about the women's game, saw not a superstar but a 20-year-old carrying expectations that would overwhelm even seasoned adults, and she responded with the mixture of gentleness and firmness that only comes from decades of experience, telling her that greatness is not the absence of doubt but the decision to act in spite of it, that doubts can be turned into fuel, and that her role as coach was not to erase those fears, but to teach her how to transform them into resilience, before pausing and adding words she had never spoken to any player before. You don't just play basketball, Caitlin, you speak it. It is your native language, and through you we are all learning to hold conversations we never knew the game could have. Words that sank into Caitlin's heart and became an anchor in the storm of attention, criticism, and relentless expectation, sustaining her through the moments when national commentators dismissed her style as reckless or selfish, through the times when carrying Iowa's championship dreams felt like an unbearable weight, reminding her that her brilliance was not an accident but a vocabulary, a fluency that transcended statistics. What Caitlin did not know then was that Lisa had made a silent promise to herself the very first day she saw that skinny teenager from West Des Moines stride into her gym with fire in her eyes and uncertainty in her heart. She vowed that she would protect this young woman's joy in the game, that she would never let the business of basketball, the media circus, or the lure of fame steal the pure love of competition that made Caitlin different. And this promise was tested again and again as Caitlin's fame grew, as interview requests multiplied, as endorsements and obligations encroached upon her time and spirit. And yet Lisa's quiet guardianship never wavered, for she knew that joy was not a luxury but the wellspring from which true greatness flows. The years that followed became a masterclass in the evolution of trust, for Lisa learned to surrender control, allowing Caitlin to attempt the kind of shots that defied conventional coaching logic, while Caitlin learned to temper her individual genius by lifting her teammates, recognizing that her light shone brightest when it illuminated those around her, and together they developed a communication that transcended words, a glance from the sideline capable of shifting an entire offensive. Strategy, a subtle nod from Caitlin that assured Lisa understood precisely what the moment demanded, a shared intuition so refined it seemed almost telepathic. During Caitlin's junior year, when Iowa made its magical run to the national championship game, the nation marveled at her poise under pressure. Yet only Lisa saw the invisible scaffolding holding her together, the private reservoirs of strength built in countless quiet conversations. And one evening, after practice, as they sat in the empty arena with its bleachers looming like silent witnesses, Lisa asked her,